Hello and welcome back again, coffee beans. This is agricultural processing, handling and storage. Definition of terms. Part 5. Raw rice. Rice which has not been parboiled. Recirculating type dryer. A batch type dryer equipped to circulate and or mixed fixed volume of grain during the drying operation. Recombined milk. Dry skim milk. Dry buttermilk plus butter oil. Reconditioning period. The period following the holding period when potatoes are warmed up to improve processing quality or reduce the risk of subsequent bruise damage due to handling. Reconstituted milk. Refers to the milk powder plus water. Red streaked grains. Or grains, whole or broken, having red streaks of the total length of which is 1/2 or more of the length of the grains. Refrigerant. Any substance that absorbs heat through expansion or vaporization. The fluid for heat transfer in a refrigerating system. The refrigerant absorbs heat at a low temperature and transfer heat at a higher temperature and higher pressure. Refrigerant flow control. Meters the proper amount of refrigerant to the evaporator and reduces the pressure of the liquid entering the evaporator so that the liquid will vaporize in the evaporator at the desired low temperature. Refrigeration. The process of moving heat from one location to another by use of refrigerant in a closed-loop cycle. Regular milled rice is a rice grain from which the hull, the germ, the outer bran layers and the greater part of the inner bran layers have been removed, but parts of the lengthwise streaks of the bran layers may still be present on 15% to 40% of the sample grains. Relative humidity. Ratio of the amount of water present in the air to the amount required for saturation of the air at the same dry bulb temperature and barometric pressure. Expressed as percentage. A measure of the moisture content of air expressed as a percentage. It is the ratio of weight of water vapor in a given volume of air at a given temperature to the maximum quantity of water vapor which the same volume of air could hold at the same temperature. Relief valve. An automatic valve, which is held shut by spring of correct strength. Excesses pressure opens the valve and releases some the gas or liquid. This valve is for protecting filters, air tanks, etc. from dangerous pressures. Retention. Amount of preservative remaining in the wood immediately after completion of the treating operation. Same as net absorption. Usually expressed as weight of preservative per unit volume of wood. Ribbon figure. Figure consisting of changeable, with light darker and lighter bands. Obtained by quarter sawing or slicing interlocked grain wood. Rice dryer. A device for removing excess moisture in the grain. Generally by forced convection with or without addition of heat in the drying air. Rice mill. Machine used to remove the hull and bran of the paddy to produce milled rice and consists mainly of hulling and whitening assembly, a machine or equipment used to remove husk or hull and the bran of paddy to produce milled rice. Rice milling refers to the process of removing the husk from the paddy and the bran from the kernel, brown rice. In Japan and some other countries where rice is stored or transported in the form of brown rice, this refers to the removal of the bran layers. Overmilled rice. Rice grain from which the hull, the germs, and the bran layers have been completely removed. Regular milled rice. Rice grain from which the hull, the germ, the outer bran layers and the greater part of the inner bran layers have been removed, but part of the lengthwise streaks of the bran layers may still be present on 15% to 40% of the sample grains. Well-milled rice. Rice grain from which the hull, the germ, the outer bran layer, and the greater part of the inner bran layer have been removed, but part of the lengthwise of the bran layer may still be present on less than 15% of the sample grains. Rice variety. This refers to the category, species of palai from which processed or milled rice was derived, denoting its genetic characteristics, whether it is traditional variety not belonging to fancy variety rice or a result of genetic improvement, hybridization. Traditional variety shall include all other indigenous or native varieties not included in the listing of fancy palai or rice, example Intan and Ramanad. Modern variety shall include genetically improved palai varieties exemplified by the IR series, BPI series, PSB series and other common names. Roaster. An overgrown fryer, roller mill, major component of the corn mill used to reduce corn kernel into corn grits. Rotary separator. An alternative term for a rotary device. Similar to a cylinder, which is fitted to promote separation only. Rotary strainers. A slowly rotating, perforated cylinder mounted horizontally. Rotating screens. Cylindrical screens used in cleaners instead of the vibrating screens. Rough rice. Sometimes used to describe paddy, meaning unhusked rice. Rubber roll husker. Machine used to remove the husk from the paddy grain by passing the grain between two rubber rolls operating at different peripheral speeds. Rubber roll type. Type of rice mill using rubber roll huller and utilizes friction and or combination of other types of whitener. Rooping process. An empty cell process for treating, usually with oil, in which the following sequence is employed: compressed air. Cylinder filled without reducing pressure, pressure increase and held until required absorption is obtained, final vacuum. R. Value. A measure of a material's ability to resist the flow of heat. The inverse of K for one layer of construction, or the inverse of U for a complete structure. Units are square meter Kelvin over watts. Square foot Fahrenheit over BTU hour. Sample board. A board from which one or more kiln samples will be cut, or a board taken from a kiln truckload during drying for the purpose of cutting a moisture section. Scalding. Lowering of animal into steam to prepare skin for dehairing. Scalping. Rough cleaning of paddy. Scattered grains. The ratio of weight of grains that fell out from the machine during the drying operation to the weight of the total grain input to the dryer. Expressed in percent. Scattering loss. Ratio weight of grains that fell out from the machine during threshing operation to the weight of total grain input of the thresher. Expressed in percent. Screw press. A straight or tapered screw of fixed or varying pitch contained in a perforated or slotted cylinder. Season. To dry lumber and other wood items to the desired final moisture content and stress condition for its intended use. Seasoning. Removing moisture from green wood, and in some cases relief of stresses, in order to improve its serviceability. Sensible heating or cooling refers to a rate of heat transfer attributable only to a change in dry bulb temperature of the air. Separation loss. Ratio of the weight of grains that come out of the threshing chamber with the straw to the weight of total grain input of the thresher. Expressed in percent. 7-type separator is a type of paddy separator that makes use of the difference in width and thickness. Shelling cylinder, shelling drum. Part of the shelling unit that rotates about an axis, and it is equipped with pegs on its periphery. Shelling unit, shelling chamber. Part of the sheller where the kernels are detached and separated from the corn cobs. Shipping dry. Lumber and other wood products that have been air or kiln dried to a sufficiently low moisture content to prevent stain, mold, and decay in transit. Short grain, palai, is a palai whose average length of the full-size brown rice grain is below 5.5 millimeters. Short grain, milled rice, is a rice with 80% or more of the whole milled rice grains having a length of less than 5.0 millimeters. Shrinkage, the contraction of wood caused by drying the material below the fiber saturation point. Radial, tangential, and volumetric is usually expressed as a percentage of the dimension of the wood when green. Sieving, the isolation of desired seed by a mechanical device where the desired seed penetrates the device and the undesired material is carried over the device. Sifter, wire mesh or perforated metal sheet, moving in back and forth direction, permitting smaller particles to fall through the openings and larger particles to remain on top. Single pass rice mill, a rice mill that employs only one widening machine, a machine which accomplishes in one passing the dehulling and widening process. Size is the length category of at least 80% of the sample of whole brown rice, milled rice to which the sample belongs. Size distribution curve, a graphic representation of results of a size analysis. Small brokens are rice particles which will not pass through a perforated sieve with a round perforation of 1.4 millimeters but length of the grain is shorter than 3/8. Soaking or steeping, allowing paddy to remain in water to increase its moisture content during the parboiling process. Specific delivery is the ratio of the heat required to raise the temperature of a unit weight of a substance to the mass of an equal volume of water at some standards temperature. Specific gravity, the ratio of the oven dry weight of a sample to the weight of an equal volume of water at some specific moisture content is green. Air dry or oven dry. Specific heat, the amount of heat which must be removed or added in order to lower or raise the temperature of 1 pound of a substance 1 degree Fahrenheit. Static pressure, pressure buildup in the plenum chamber to maintain uniform distribution of airflow through the grain mass. Expressed in Pascal, the portion of air pressure due to compression of the air. Stationary auger, an auger essentially permanently installed on a particular site without capability. Steaming, in parboiling, subjecting the soaked paddy to heat treatment by passing steam through the paddy mass that causes the rice to gelatinize. Steam jet refrigeration is a refrigerating system using steam as a refrigerant, which expands through a converging diverging nozzle and rushes out at supersonic speed. Steam pressure is vapor pressure at temperature above the boiling point when the volume is confined under pressure. Sterilization, the killing of all living microorganisms, ordinarily through the use of heat or some chemical. Sticking, severance of the major blood vessels in the neck are immediately anterior to the heart of animal by means of a knife and stuck. Suction line conveys the low-pressure vapor from the evaporator to the suction inlet of the compressor. Supernatant, the liquid standing above a sediment or precipitate after settling or centrifuging. Tempering, temporarily holding the grain between the drying passes, allowing the moisture content in the center of the grain and that on the surface of the grain to equalize. Tension set, occurs during tension, depends to give the wood a larger than normal dimension after drying. Usually occurring in the outer layers during the first stages. Also caused by external restraint during drying of wet wood. Tension wood, a type of wood found in leaning trees of some hardwood species. Characterized by the presence of fibers technically known as gelatinous, and by excessive longitudinal shrinkage. Tension wood fibers tend to pull out on sodden planed surfaces, giving so-called fuzzy grain. Tension wood causes crook and bow and may collapse. Because of lower than normal drying, tension wood zones may remain wet when the surrounding wood is dry. Thermal break. Insulating material between two heat conductors which reduces conduction heat transfer. Thermal conductivity is the amount of heat transmitted in unit time across the unit area through unit thickness for unit temperature change. Thermal expansion, the increase in volume of a substance caused by temperature change. Thermal vaporizer, an apparatus consisting of a container for chemical and a heater to maintain the vessel at a temperature sufficiently high to accelerate evaporation or sublimation of the pesticide. The apparatus may contain a blower to disperse the pesticide vapor into a treated area, or may rely upon natural turbulent diffusion for dispersion. Thermocouple, the part of a pyrometer which consists of two dissimilar metal wires welded together at the inner end and held in a protective housing. Thin layer, a layer of material exposed fully to an airstream during drying. Ton of refrigeration is the equivalent for removal of heat at the rate of 12,000 BTU per hour or 200 BTU per minute. Total feed rate, the sum of grain feed rate and material other than grain feed rate expressed in metric tons per hour. Total grain input, sum of the weights of collected threshed grains and all grains lost during threshing. Total heat content is the total heat energy in the air, which includes the heat due to the temperature of the air, the heat required to change whatever water vapor was in the air from water into water vapor, and the heat energy in the water vapor itself. Total kernel input, sum of the weight of collected shelled kernels and all the shelling losses. Total milling recovery, this is the weight of rice obtained in a milling operation expressed as a percentage of the original paddy weight. Total milling yield, total rice, including the head rice and broken rice milled from paddy, usually expressed as a percent. Trier, small metal probe for taking samples of paddy or rice from bags or from bulk containers. Two-stage drying, a drying strategy wherein et grains are pre-dried to skin dry condition and finally to 1% moisture content through either sun-drying or mechanical drying. Undermilled rice, milled rice which has less bran removed than normal. Underrun disc sheller, machine used to remove the husk from the paddy grain. It consists of two horizontal discs, the top one stationary and the lower one rotating. Underrunner disc husker or huller, a type of paddy husker consisting of two horizontal discs partly coated with an abrasive layer. The upper disc usually being stationary and the lower disc rotating and vertically movable for adjusting the clearance between the discs and by abrasive action. Removes the husk of the paddy fed between the discs. Uniformity coefficient, the ratio of the D40 size to the D90 size of a granular material. Uniformity index, a rating of the uniformity of size of particles of a granular material. Uniformly index, a rating of the uniformity of size of particles of a granular material. It is a dimensionless ratio of the particle size corresponding to 95% retained by weight to the particle size corresponding to 10% retained by weight in a cumulative sieve analysis of the material. Unit cooler, a direct cooling factory made encased assembly that includes cooling element. Fan and motor, unshelled kernels, kernels that remain in the cob after shelling. Unshelled loss, ratio of the weight of corn kernels that remained in the cobs of the corn fed into the shelling chamber to the weight of the total corn kernel input of the sheller. Expressed in percent. Unthreshed heads, any pod, cob part of same from which all or part of the seed has not been detached. Unthreshed loss, ratio of the weight of grains that remained in the panicles of the plants fed into the threshing chamber to the weight of total grain input of the thresher. Expressed in percent. Unvented heater, fuel burning unit heater exhausting combustion products into the heated air stream instead of outdoors. Upright freezer, a freezer in which access is gained through a side opening door. Vacuum, a perfect vacuum in space entirely devoid of gas, liquids or solids. Vacuum. Final, the vacuum applied is final operation in pressure process for preserving timber. It is used to recover surplus preservative and to dry the surface of the timber. Vacuum gauge, a gauge used to measure the amount of vacuum existing in a chamber or line. Vacuum. Initial, the vacuum applied to remove air from wood before treating with preservative. Valve, any device or arrangement used to open or close an opening to permit or restrict the flow of a liquid. Gas, or vapor, a device to control flow. Air relief valve, device that release air from a pipeline automatically without permitting loss of water. Air vacuum, air relief valve, device that releases air from a pipeline automatically without permitting loss of water or admits air automatically if the internal pressure becomes less than atmospheric. Check valve, valve used in a pipeline to allow flow in only one direction. Drain valve, 1. Automatic, spring-loaded valve that will automatically open and drain the line when the pressure drops to near zero. 2. Flushing type valve on the end of a line for the purpose of flushing out dirt and debris. This may be incorporated into an end plug or end cap. Foot valve. Check valve used on the bottom of the suction pipe to retain the water in the pump when it is not in operation or prevent backflow. Pressure relief valve. Spring-loaded valve set to open at pressure slightly above the operating pressure. Used to relieve excessive pressure and surges. Vacuum relief valve. Valve used to prevent a vacuum in pipelines and void collapsing of thin wall pipe. Vapor. The gaseous phase of substances that are liquid or solid at atmospheric temperature and pressure. Vapor barrier. Material to retard or prevent the passage of water vapor through a structure. Vapor compressor. Removes the vapor from the evaporator and raises the temperature and pressure of the vapor to a point such that the vapor can be condensed with normally available condensing media. Vapor pressure is when the water molecules in the air exert a particular pressure. Vertical abrasive widener is available with the cone directed either up or down, but with no difference in performance or capacity. Vertical bin type columnar type. Batch type dryer wherein a fixed volume of grain is held stationary in a vertical grain holding bin. Vibrating screen. A circular or square shallow container with a replaceable screen bottom. Vibration-induced pressures. Pressures induced by grounds or machinery vibrations. Volatile acids. Fatty acids containing 6 or less carbon atoms, which are soluble in water and in which can be steam distilled at atmospheric pressure. Volatility. A measurement of the ease with which a liquid may be vaporized at relatively low temperature. Water-cooled condenser. A condenser that removes the heat of the refrigerant by water flowing over or through condenser surfaces. Water defrosting. Defrosting by spraying or pouring water over well-milled rice. Rice grain from which the hull, the germ, the outer bran layers, and the greater part of the inner bran layer have been removed. But part of the lengthwise streaks of the bran layers may be still present on less than 15% of the sample grains. Wet bulb temperature is the temperature at which liquid or solid water, by evaporating into air, can bring the air to saturation adiabatically at the same temperature. White belly. Chalkiness in the milled rice kernel. Whitener. Component of a rice mill that removes the bran layer in the brown. Whitening. Process of removing the bran layer during milling. Whole rice. Head rice. A full kernel or piece of kernel which is 3/4 size or larger. Hope it helps. Thank you again for listening. Please like, subscribe and comment your suggestion on topics you want to hear. Links of previous topics are stated in the description box below. See you in the next part. Bye. Rar.